Check.
Things. Let me bring the apologies of the Director General of the African Development Bank, Madam Nena, who was supposed to be here with us today to open this breakfast meeting because of other engagements within the purview of the annual meetings. She's been called for another meeting. She will not be able to join us, but the manager, our manager of Education and Skills Development Division, Madam Endrina, will be sort of making the opening remarks. But before that, let me start by welcoming you to this annual meeting side event on the establishment of the African Renaissance Institute for Science and Technology. Just to make it clear that this is a consultative meeting to share and exchange ideas on the various ways of boosting science, technology, and innovation and research in Africa through building partnerships among STI sort of players in the space of centers of excellence. The aim of the event is to provide a platform to sort of discuss, share ideas, share knowledge on the different ways stakeholders can come together in moving the agenda of STI to the next level, in line with the Agenda 2063 of the African Union. The event is organized in two parts. First, we are going to have a joint presentation by experts in academia who are going to take us through the idea of the network that we are proposing, and of course share their thoughts on how it's going to look like, the roadmap on what needs to be done. And number two, we are going to have an interactive session where experts now will come, will share the ideas, their thoughts on how they think the network should look like, the objectives that should be set to achieve the kind of dream that we have for the network that we intend to establish. And now I take this opportunity to invite Madam Endrina, as I said, who is the manager of Education and Skills Development Division at the African Development Bank, to come and make the opening remarks. Madam Endrina.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Again, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to apologize again, just to repeat what Emmanuel said. We had the DG was supposed to come in a few minutes, but unfortunately the other meeting has started earlier than we thought. So this morning, I'll be reading the speech on behalf of Madam Nena. So allow me to do that, and then we continue our program as planned. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. At least I need to see a smile that you are talking to me. You are too serious. This is a conversation, so let's make it comfortable, if I may use that word. But thank you so much. So allow me to read the speech on behalf of Madam Nena, the Director General for Eastern Africa, for the Eastern Africa, for the Africa Development Bank. Let me start by welcoming you to this consultative proof of concept meeting on the need to establish an African Renaissance Institute for Science and Technology, which is part of the Africa Development Bank Group's annual meeting. I congratulate the organizers of this event for making science, technology, and innovation core focus in building quality human capital in Africa. This choice is very timely, as it will give various stakeholders an opportunity to work together to boost research, innovation, development of Africa's economic transformation. This event is also aligned to the Africa Development Bank's agenda on human capital development, but also it is aligned to the Africa Union 2024 Year of Education, which aims to build resilient education systems for increased access to inclusive, lifelong learning quality, as well as relevant learning in Africa. Now, although African countries have made concerted effort in building quality human capital to drive the development, the region still continues to lag behind other regions in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. According to UNESCO, in Africa, only 22% of the students pursue science, technology, engineering, and mathematics-related career fields, compared to 24.3% in Europe, Central Asia, and 25.6% in East Asia and Pacific. And only 3 out of the 10 students in higher education are enrolled for STEM-related fields, with female students significantly underrepresented, with only 25% enrollment. Also, the continent's performance in terms of research output and innovation, again, remains very low, and the share of patent applications also is equally low, less than 1%. This is attributed to inadequate national budget allocation and weak policy frameworks, particularly for higher education in Africa. For instance, African countries spend only 0.2% and 0.9% of GDP on technical vocational education and training and higher education, respectively, relative to 1.24% of GDP in high-income countries. Regrettably, this has been disastrous for Africa. For example, while the region accounts for 25% of the worldwide disease burden, only 0.1% of the world's vaccine doses and pharmaceuticals are produced in Africa. I think this is a fact we all know. The continent has about 198 scientists, researchers per 1 million people, compared to countries like Brazil, the United States, where the ratio is 656 and 4,500 per million, respectively. Africa, therefore, needs to undertake policies and actions to increase training in STEM, to close the STI skills gap and research as one of the ways to ensure inclusive growth and development. This indeed calls for partnerships among African university centers of excellency, technology, innovation, and indeed with the industries. It is against this backdrop that the Africa Development Bank is proposing the establishment of the African Renaissance Institute for Science Technology to help train critical mass of Africans to solve Africa's problems and assist them to become engines of Africa's economic transformation. And we want to thank the brains behind this idea. This will be done through targeted interdisciplinary engagement of public-private higher education research institutions, SMEs, industrial collaboration with entrepreneurs, as well as STEM research and education. Appreciating the need to scale up Africa's STEM skills development, research, and innovation, the Africa Development Bank has continued to invest in higher education on the continent. The bank has been actively engaged in education and skills development since 1975, committing significant resources to strengthen STEM infrastructure at tertiary level and to enhance sector policies and policy environments. In the last decade, the bank has committed about 916 million in loans and grants to the education sector. And you will be happy to know that 90% of this financing was actually allocated to strengthening the policy environment, STEM-related infrastructures in universities and TVET institutions. This was as a way of improving access, relevance, and tertiary education as a whole. The bank's support to education and skills development is anchored on the Skills for Employability and Productivity in Africa Action Plan. SEPA seeks to bridge Africa's skills gap and address skills mismatch and relevance by focusing on two mutually reinforcing areas of intervention. One is really expanding infrastructure for the development of demand-driven skills, and the second one is strengthening the enabling policy environment for skills development. Among the bank-supported STEM initiative, the Pan-African University Phase 1 project at a cost of $45 million US dollars has permitted the operationalization of the Pan-African University, which has graduated over 1,896 graduates. Among them, only 33% were women. 1,591 graduates at master's level and 305 graduates at PhD level in fields that member states have determined as essential to moving the Agenda 2063. Following the success of Phase 1, the project Phase 2 design, estimated at about 100 million, is in progress with an expected approval of about September this year. So in our view, this conversation also is timely, and we hope it will be able to fit into that process. As a bank, we've also invested 18.6 million in 3 Nelson Mandela Institutes. These are the International Institute of Water and Environmental Engineering in Ouagadougou. We also have the Africa University of Science and Technology in Abuja, the Nelson Mandela Institute of Science and Technology in Arusha, whose focus is to enhance the relevance of STEM teaching and research, improve the employability of graduates, and support project coordination and regional operation. This has produced, as I indicated, 1,948 PhD and MSc graduates from bank-funded scholarships. And again, for that, only 31% of these are women. The 3 institutions have multiplied the number of graduates by 3.8 compared to 2016 when this project started. And they've been able to produce about 357 internationally recognized publications. 81 partnerships have also been brokered with the private sector to enhance the quality and relevance of education. In addition, and to address the challenge of financing, the bank is also working with the Africa Union Commission and other partners to establish a sustainable and innovative financing mechanism, the Africa Education, Science, Technology and Innovation Fund, which we call ASTIF, which aims to contribute to addressing the financing gaps in STEM education, research and innovation. And it's our desire that by end of this year, we should be able to launch the fund. In our discussion today on the proposed network of centers of excellence in STEM, consideration could be given to the following: support to centers of excellence for the development of human capital and skills for Africa. The establishment of the proposed network will be a boost to Africa's support to STI and will provide the implementation of the bank's investment across the sectors. Establishment of the skills enhancement zones to strengthen real sector productive skills, building on lessons from bank skills enhancement zone flagship program models which were in Nigeria, for instance. The network could be an opportunity to scale up the skills enhancement zones, including working with universities, polytechnics, and technical universities across Africa in the field as proposed, such as manufacturing, renewable energy, and agriculture. Engagement of the diaspora through a fellowship program. The network could help leverage on the expertise and the skills of Africans in the diaspora, in existing African centers of excellency and emerging technical institutions to establish a very strong STI program. Development of African accelerators to link ideas to market. The network would or could accelerate that transition from idea to market, and as a bank would be very much interested to see how these proposed ideas would be put into action. In conclusion, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the bank's investment in science, technology, and innovation, and its support to innovative financing mechanism, we feel presents a solid foundation for this consultative, and that it will be a pivotal step in forging this collaborative roadmap and also harnessing STI to drive the African development. This idea will boost Africa's support to STI, will also promote the implementation of the Africa's Back agenda. So really, we have a lot of interest in this, and we'll be listening in keenly to see how the conversation will shape up and create opportunities for the bank to scale up some of its ideas that they have been supporting the regional member countries. With that, I would like to conclude by saying that I'm looking forward to a productive deliberation which will aid the design of the African Renaissance Institute of Science Technology with the capacity to address the challenges that face Africa. Thank you so much. Can I just add my own words? I think I was reading on behalf of my Director General. I think for us, as the Director has said, we are very excited for this, and we want to appreciate the team or the brains behind. I know they will be given the opportunity here to just articulate some of the ideas they have and some of the work that has gone forth. So what we are looking forward from this conversation for us is really to see where do we go next. And so in our deliberation, let's not just be a conversation, but let it be a conversation that will be leading us to develop an action plan that each one of us will be willing to contribute. Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to a productive conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Endrina. A round of applause to Endrina. Endrina set a very good tone for the conversations which will take place today, this morning. Just before I bring, the second, set of speakers who will do a joint presentation, my name is Emmanuel Mutisia. I am the chairman of the Kenya Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, and I'm in this space to see how we can work together in advancing STI in Kenya and across the continent. Two things that will be critical moving forward. One, the experts seated where you are have been carefully selected so that we can advance this conversation. And it's important, as the manager said, that you contribute to the process to ensure that what comes out of this meeting is a sort of a group-owned or an African-owned designed vehicle that will take STI to the next level. And now I would now like to call upon the next set of speakers led by Professor Wole. I know you are a number of you, maybe around 8 of you. They are going to do a joint presentation just to take us through the thought process so that now after that we can have an interactive session to sort of contribute to the process of designing this vehicle that we are calling the African Renaissance Institute of Science and Technology. So Professor Wole, we have 6 seats around. If we are more than 6, these first 6 will sit here. The remaining 2 can take their seats closer to the front. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Wole Shoboye-John. It's a pleasure to be here today as part of the ARIS team. Just to give you a sense of who you're talking to, I'd like to just pass this around and just please introduce yourself.
Good morning. I'm Samuel Oluwatobi-Oluwafemi, Professor of Inorganic Chemistry and Nanotechnology, University of Johannesburg, South Africa.
Kwabnene Akon, Professor in Engineering and Provost, College of Engineering, Kwame University of Science and Technology.
Gebisa Ejeta, Professor of Plant Breeding in Genetics and International Agriculture from Purdue University.
Good morning. I'm Esther Akinlabi, a Professor of Mechanical Engineering. I hold 2 affiliations. One, in my primary responsibility, I serve as the Deputy Faculty, Pro-Vice Chancellor for Research and Knowledge Exchange at Northumbria University. My secondary affiliation is Visiting Professor at University of Johannesburg, South Africa. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kwajo Adinkra Apia, Professor of Civil Engineering and the Vice Chancellor of Sunyani Technical University in the Bono region of Ghana. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Jerry John, Professor Jerry John Kunyu. I'm a professor of telecom engineering and the director of the Responsible Artificial Intelligence Lab at KNUST, Ghana. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Dan De Laurentiis, Professor of Aerospace Engineering and Vice President for the Discovery Park Institutes at Purdue University.
So as you can see, we're a group of folks from the diaspora, from within Africa, and we also have within our group international experts that have this idea of an African Renaissance. Now you may wonder why an African Renaissance. It turns out the very first university in the world was in Africa, in Fez, Morocco. And if you look at Carthage, you find out that the civilization that occurred in Carthage occurred before Rome or Greece. And it was a period in which Africa was a leader in science and technology in ways that transformed the community at that time. Now, if one thinks of an approach like this,
it's inherently interdisciplinary, and it's inherently focused on development. Now, before we get going, I want to just thank all the folks at the ADB who've really worked hard to make today possible, and give you some context for how we started this effort. So just a few years ago, Gebisa Ejeta and I, who are both professors in the US, Gebisa is at Purdue University, and by the way, the recipient of President Biden's most recent National Medal of Science. He's also a winner. He's also a winner of the World Food Prize. And so I had the opportunity to serve in a committee with Gebisa, which is a committee where we were on the UN Scientific Advisory Board for the UN Secretary General. And as we both served in that committee, one of the things that really struck us was that we wanted to think of ways not only of informing the SDGs, but ways of engaging Africa in a broader effort that would bring the diaspora into contact with those here in Africa, into contact with international teams to drive combined impact. And we started looking at these development goals and thinking about what it translates to in terms of what one needs to do, what fields one needs to address to really have meaningful development in Africa. And that led eventually to a meeting with the president of the ADB that occurred in October of last year. By the way, Gebisa was on the PhD committee of the president when the president was at Purdue University. And so this meeting here that occurred in Iowa just last October really brought us together to start thinking with the bank on how we might work together to make this happen. And there are many countries that have pursued approaches like this. This is what was done in Israel when they came together with the diaspora to drive Israel in 1948. Now, what we basically maintain is that history has shown that science, technology, and innovation are the engines of development. This is apparent in some of the examples that I gave you in North Africa. It's apparent in Europe, North America, and South America, and most recently in the BRICS, especially with the Asian tigers. And what you find is that in one generation, 30 years, all of those places have developed when there is a strategy that has a focus on how do you educate a critical mass of people in science and technology, how do you invest your GDP at a level that can drive science and technology, not just in education, but in research and development. And most importantly, is how you convert all of that into industry and business. And you see examples, for example, in the Middle East, a country like UAE, that has had a strategy of purchasing that human capital and bringing it into contact with some environment that's enabling to achieve development, again, in 30 years. And so the question is, why not Africa? Right? Why not Africa? And the truth is, actually, Africa has already started to make some major strides in this direction, especially in the last 15 or so years. And with some of the investments by the African Development Bank, the African Union, and also the World Bank, what we have seen in the last decade or two has been a major increase in the investment in science and technology. We have the African Centers of Excellence, some of whom are represented here. We have the Partnership for Applied Sciences and Engineering and Technology, PASET, which is also represented here. We have the Pan-African universities that are being funded at a significant level to really build strengths in research here in Africa. We have the Nelson Mandela institutions, also funded by the ADB, AUSD, Nelson Mandela African Institute of Science and Technology, and 2IE. I had the honor of serving as the president of AUST for 4 years. And I could tell you that the investment by the bank really made a difference in being able to introduce world-class infrastructure into a university like that. And then we have the regional programs of Euro Forum, where you have collaborators in agriculture coming together, and many other such regional collaborations. And so if you look at all of this, these initiatives have started to move the needle. We're beginning to build a significant cohort of researchers and innovators. And today we'll give you some examples that will show you in very tangible ways what is emerging from these efforts. So I would say we need to incentivize and build on African progress in STI and the connections with the diaspora that have been established, along with the international collaborations that enable this to flourish. But there's a race. And the race is the following. 80% of Africa's population is under the age of 20. Now, in a world in which you have a demographic cliff with declining populations in other parts of the world, that could be an opportunity if we educate them and prepare them for the workforce. Or it can be a total calamity if we don't. And we have a 20-year window in which we need to do this, where if we provide this population with the appropriate STEM education, then we can create the workforce that will serve not only Africa but the world, in a world that badly needs the skills that can be translated, especially in this era of the fourth industrial revolution. But there's some things we need to do differently. One of these is to make sure we engage in what we call demand-driven education, which means we don't just train people in what I call supply-driven education, but we look at the fields of knowledge where the knowledge is needed, and we have the right pedagogical approaches to provide this to our students. The other thing that we need to do is we need to transform our economies. If you look in terms of resources, Africa is the richest continent on earth. But we're naive because we think that by digging out these things from the ground and exporting them, we have viable economies. And we also think that those that import those things will give us concessions afterwards. And so, quite frankly, we need to think not only about how we extract these rich array of resources, but how we add value to them through industry. And then secondly, if you look at the energy resources of Africa, a third of the continent's needs can be met by the geothermal resources that go from Egypt down to Uganda. A third of the continent's needs can be met by the single drop of the Congo River. And a third of the continent's needs can be met by the oil and gas reserves that we have in the Gulf of Guinea and now also in other parts of Africa. But we need to convert these into petrochemical processing to increase the value of what we extract by at least a factor of 100. There's no reason why we should not be richer than the Middle East. No reason if we adopt a different strategy. That doesn't consider nuclear capabilities. It doesn't consider coal and other energy sources. And so what this means is we need to build the human capacity to do this. And I maintain we need to produce many more Dangotes who do this across the continent, building viable industry that adds value to people. And if you look at the energy resources, it's the same. As you look at all those different resources, we need to create the basis for renewable energies of different types and translate those to practice in our solutions. And then as we engage this era of the fourth industrial revolution, we have this huge opportunity with AI and machine learning to really drive the future of work, especially with AI and its applications. And this has major implications for how we can leapfrog into digital manufacturing, digital construction, digital recycling, in a way that also connects to digital logistics that have been translated to practice. And you might say, well, maybe we should not engage in this. If we don't engage in this, we'll have to wait for the fifth industrial revolution, which may be decades away. But I say, why not, right? And why not means, why don't we engage ourselves in some integrated efforts, not in silos, that can drive impact. And so within that context, what the ARIST initiative really seeks to do is to align the forces that can accelerate the development of Africa. And those forces are people. Those people include, of course, development partners, policymakers, but they also include STEM experts, both here and in the diaspora, international partners who bring critical knowledge, and industrial advisory boards. The industrial advisory boards are absolutely critical because industry has major needs that are not being met, and we need to align those forces to drive those needs. The second thing that we need to do is we need to really develop certain skills in our workforce. A lot of the time, many of the schools and universities focus on theoretical knowledge without practical development of skills. And so this idea of theory and practice and how you leverage skills is absolutely critical. So we're proposing the establishment of skills development zones, similar to what the African Development Bank wants to propose, and we want to amplify these. And then lastly is this idea of accelerators. So you can go from ideas to small company, but a lot of times the small companies are subcritical. And when they're subcritical, they just can't grow. And so in many places, what they do is they create these accelerators where you bring a group of subcritical things together into a bigger thing that creates a corporate entity that can grow. And we'll give you some examples of this and how we feel that these will really increase the rate of transition to successful ventures that are driven by STEM. And so what we want to do here in ARIS is to drive the three. The most important one is to start the conversation and the interaction in the first. And so the first part of this is, how do you start this, right? How do you start this? And we feel that we need to basically build an integrated partnership with efforts that are already on the ground. So this is really intended to avoid us being silos, but come together as an integrated force. Leverage also really good international partnerships with the Discovery Park at Purdue, which is a major accelerator, and other kinds of accelerators that we can bring into contact with African networks. And then the third is to establish a structure to coordinate the interactions of these groups, connecting also to young African scientists so that we are constantly nurturing the next generation to succeed us, and an industrial advisory board that really identifies the person power needs of industry as well as the true needs in research and development in a way that drives the success of these companies. And as we think about this, it's really critical to realize that we have to inspire the next generation. So the way I think about this is when I look at the fervor we show towards soccer, we want the young people to have the same kind of excitement for STEM by engaging them in robotics and activities like that, that introduce them to technology and the excitement about technology in ways that engage them in the desire to. Thank you. What we need to think about are apprenticeships that start right from the high school. So technical high schools and places where people can develop skills that are certified. And we also need to take this up to polytechnics and universities, and especially universities that combine hands-on learning, project-based learning into a framework that prepares people for the world of work. And wherever possible, blend that with work experience in the real world so that when the people graduate, they're ready for work on the first day. And as you go to the higher levels, we need to have different types of degrees, not just masters of science. We need masters of technology, masters of applications in ways that can be pursued whilst people pursue the world of work. We also need what I call practice-based PhDs in addition to doctors of philosophy. And so what you do is you create then that pipeline through a process in which you then educate the workforce in a way that's very highly focused. And ultimately, beyond that, we need skills processing zones. I'm always amazed by the number of people I see flying business class or first class to Africa to do a welding job. And that's because we don't have certified welders. It's not that we don't have people that can weld. It's because we don't have certified welders. And so most of the offshore companies that do oil and gas have to fly all these people into the continent because we haven't taken care of basic things like that. And so this idea of having workforce development where you train the trainers to train the practitioners is absolutely critical. And in some of these new areas such as machine learning, we need to amplify our efforts by training many skilled users of these technologies in a way that can transform the continent. And these training efforts need to be demand-driven. They shouldn't just be because we have the skills in our university to do this, we will do this. They should look at the needs of industry, and the best test of that is if industry is willing to pay for the graduates or the training. Now at this point I'd like to call on Esther to talk a little bit about manufacturing. Can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Shoboyejo, for setting the scene. So I'll talk next a few slides on advanced manufacturing. As I was chatting with him this morning, that the key driver to achieving all the SDGs and the Africa Union Agenda 2063 is advanced manufacturing. In all the sectors, if we can get it right with advanced manufacturing technologies, advanced manufacturing systems, we are good to go on the African continent. So on this slide, we have a few show here regarding additive manufacturing, which is manufacturing of prototypes from powder materials or the use of filament for, thank you, sir. Or the use of filament for 3D printing. I'm one of the privileged few on the African continent who had the opportunity to do my PhD work in friction stir welding. He just talked about not having certified welders on the African continent. It is true. I think South Africa and a few countries on the African continent actually run through programs to certify welders. And this is very, very important and a key driver for us to achieve the SDGs, the AU Agenda 2063, and move Africa forward with respect to technology. So on this slide, we have the laser bed powder systems and a number of systems here. Up to now, we still have very, very few systems like this on the African continent. I'm very familiar. I've worked with the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in Pretoria, South Africa. For many, many years, the system is there. Though very expensive, capital intensive, but once the system is there, it's able to do, it has a lot of capabilities to launch and be able to be used for many prototype development, for producing commercialized products, and so many advantages that we can leverage on the African continent. So we need more centers like the CSIR Pretoria. I know they launch calls for Africa Laser Centers on an annual basis. I'm not sure of how many academics on the African continent is actually familiar with this and able to get applications through for people to have access to use the laser system and also to train PhD students as well. So these are the kind of things that ARIS look forward to leverage on with respect to network, how we can get African academics, African PhDs to get to CSIR, while we look forward to more establishment of more centers like that. Yeah. Semiconductors and energy devices manufacturing, this is an area that for us in Africa, we can look into manufacturing our own local semiconductors, not only relying on importation of semiconductors. And we find semiconductors being used in so many appliances that we use on a daily basis, from our smartphones to cameras to refrigerators, washing machines, and so many home-based appliances that we use on a daily basis. Africa, with its population of over 300 million people, this is an aspect that we can invest into to have centers on the African continent geared towards training and developing people in the production of semiconductors and energy devices. You looking into how we can get our own products manufactured locally. Biomanufacturing is new and developing at a very rapid pace. This has to do with using biological systems in manufacturing. I see a lot of universities, a lot of work being done and being published with respect to looking into biomass and also looking into how we can have recyclable materials produced using biological systems. Example into plastics, we now have so many research ongoing on the African continent on developing plastics that are recyclable, recyclable papers, and textiles that are recyclable. Also, there's a lot of opportunities that we can harness and look into in biomanufacturing. I know that Africa is a blessed country with a lot of resources, and we have experts and brains on the African continent who can look into how we can go into biomanufacturing, leverage on biomanufacturing for us to be able to move our continent from where we are now to that where we want to be. Professor Bey just mentioned briefly on, just to cap it up, or still on advanced manufacturing, that's AI, robotics, automation, and all of that. I know that we still have countries that are still in the first and the second industrial revolution. The whole world is already talking about fourth, while Japan is already talking about the fifth industrial revolution. It is okay. For Africa, we are very intelligent people. We have the capacity, and I know that we can actually jump from the first industrial revolution to the fifth one. But then, let us move. The train is moving. We got to move now to the fourth industrial revolution. Application of AI, machine learning, cloud computing, and all of that. We got to do it. And this is why we are all here today, creating the awareness and looking into how we can leverage on partners and all that we're talking about this morning to move us forward in STI. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the third objective here is to really focus on the development of accelerators. And just to illustrate what an accelerator is, I want to tell you about my very first job experience in the US, which was working for an aircraft company called McDonnell Aircraft Company. So in 1939, that company was established. In 1939, it went bankrupt. And then World War II started, and then all of a sudden there was an order for hundreds of aircraft. And the company was restarted because of the demand from the US government to buy those planes. And in many ways, that's the secret to the United States, because the military-industrial complex gets these large contracts to build these vehicles where they integrate the inputs from lots of small companies that, left to their own devices, would not be successful. And then they develop these technologies, and then they take those technologies and flow them down into commercial applications. So if you were to leave those companies just as small companies to grow to larger ones, they would never get there. And so the idea of the accelerator is you build groups that are commercially viable, that produce things of value in a way that then employs many, many people in good jobs over extended periods of time. And so in our case, we've been waiting for small companies to get large, but they will never get there. The rates are too slow. They're not competitive or critical unless you integrate these efforts into accelerators. And what we're proposing is to be part of a process that looks at how we transition our growing research environments around our universities and our research centers into accelerators around our resources. And so when one looks at minerals and how do you add value through them through manufacturing, we need to create the accelerators in an ecosystem that makes that work. Similarly, when you look at energy, you need to create the accelerators around them so that you see the transitions to market. And the same is true for health and well-being, agriculture and food security, or even areas now of artificial intelligence, machine learning, coding, and cybersecurity. You need to build those accelerators around them. And those that are doing this are building the industries of tomorrow. A good example, which I'll show you later, is an accelerator around SUNY Poly that is looking at the interaction between quantum and different levels of semiconductor devices in a way that's built around the idea of accelerators. And so what we are proposing here with ARIS is to work within the system to develop strategies to convert our emerging centers into accelerators. And at this point, I'd like to call on Kwabena just to give us some examples.
Thank you, Wole. I want to say that we have started already. What we need to do is to build on that and to accelerate the process. If we look at the growth of postgraduate education and STI in Africa, there are interesting things happening, but it is not enough. We need to build on it. If we look at the African Centers of Excellence by the World Bank, over the past decade, investment of over 600 million, and that has resulted in increased number of postgraduates, over 10,000, over 30,000 enrollment, and in terms of graduation, it is a lot. Let me talk about my university, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. We have 3 centers, and in my college, College of Engineering, we have 1,000 postgraduate students. That is through the effort. We also have technology parks, we have the innovation hubs, and then we have the R&D centers. But this is not enough. We need to connect the dots. We need to connect with what is happening so that we can accelerate. Next slide. In terms of innovation hubs, through the work that is happening in the various countries, in the various universities, now we have an emergence of African innovation hubs. We've listed a few here: the East Africa Regional Innovation Hub, we have the Ghana Hubs Network, we have the Impact Hub, we have the Botswana Digital and Innovation Hub, as well as the one in Cape Verde. These are interesting things happening. This morning we also heard about what African Development Bank is doing in other areas as well, like the Pan-African University, etc.
Thank you. So we talk about artificial intelligence. There is a lot that has been said as far as AI and its applications are concerned. The UN Secretary General set up a UN advisory to advise him as far as AI is concerned and to identify what the enablers are as far as AI and its application is concerned. 3 things came to mind. That if we can thrive as far as AI is concerned, it is possible or it is important that we have the data sets that we can use to train our models. We realize that indeed when it comes to data sets that are being used to train a lot of the AI models, Africa is not very well represented. And so there are instances where we develop models, but we are training these models with data sets that have been generated in the global north. And so when it comes to getting solutions for African markets, there is a bias as far as those models are concerned. And so it becomes important that we look at how we can develop data sets that are representative. The second thing that was identified as a key enabler has to do with the computing power. We are talking now about large language models, which basically means that we have huge amounts of data that we actually have to use to train our models. Doing so requires a lot of computing power. We have talked about the development of semiconductor accelerators, with the hope that we actually can be able to develop a lot of chips within our own unique circumstance. And so that creates a unique opportunity as far as developing chip manufacturing companies are concerned. If we actually can leapfrog as far as AI is concerned, in addition to creating an avenue for representative data sets, we also have to be able to manufacture a lot of chipsets and a lot of servers within the African continent. The third one that we are looking at, which fits perfectly into the ARIST bigger picture, has to do with making sure that we have the right amount of talent. And it has already been said that a greater percentage of the African population are below the age of 20, which primarily means that it offers an opportunity to build capacity in AI, so that as we look at the fourth industrial revolution, we actually can become a continental giant as far as driving the AI revolution is concerned. The World Economic Forum has said that when it comes to AI, 970 million new jobs are to be created by just focusing on AI. And the question has been asked, why not Africa? It has been done in India through the IITs, and so many of the big tech have people from India leading those big techs. The same applies to Israel and the rest. This is the time for Africa. In terms of applications, AI's application in agriculture. In the Responsible Artificial Intelligence Lab, which I lead at KNUST Ghana, we have worked with smallholder farmers with reference to identifying diseases on their crops and being able to get a remedy with reference to what they need to do. And the additional thing that we have added is that these remedies are communicated to the farmers not in English, but by using natural language processing, we are communicating these remedies to the farmers in their own languages. With reference to poultry farmers also, you realize that when there is an outbreak of disease in the poultry farm, if you are not careful, before you realize you are losing your entire stock. We can use artificial intelligence to detect some of these as quickly as possible. A lot has been said with reference to robotics and automation and its application in agriculture. Most of the things that we use manual labor to do, we now can be able to program systems to be able to do them. In the area of AI in healthcare, we can transform healthcare in Africa by the application of artificial intelligence. A case in point is the identification of rare diseases. We have developed a system in my lab called Care for Rare. There are instances where children are born and then they are infected by a disease which is not known to the doctor. And before the doctor can say, Jack, the child is dead. But now there are huge amounts of data that we can use to train our models so that these diseases can be detected way in advance. Then I move into one area, still in AI in health. There are people which in many instances we tend to overlook, but they are a significant population as far as the world is concerned. And these are people who are differently able. How do we ensure that with the advancement of technology, we are not leaving them behind? Because the story around all that we are talking about is leave no one behind. How do we use AI to ensure that people who have issues with mobility, we are able to help them? There are, what we have on the slide, for instance, this may be expensive, but in the lab, what we are doing is picking ordinary wheelchairs, retrofitting it, introducing a lot of intelligence so that people who have lost their limbs can actually communicate with these wheelchairs in their own language and help them as far as their mobility is concerned. Still AI in health, being able to identify breast cancer at an early stage by actually the use of AI. We can apply AI in energy. We also can apply AI in the public sector. Applying AI in the public sector is what I'm landing on. And the reality is that there is a lot of wastage in the public sector, primarily because when decisions are being made, it's not data-driven. What we are proposing is injecting a lot of data-driven decision-making in the public sector so that the little resources that we have can be used efficiently. It is a right time for AI, and why not Africa? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, keep that. So this is clearly transformational technology. And if you look at the impact that smartphones have had on Africa, I think this is still just the beginning. And what's also interesting here is to see the startups that are already forming from an African context, raising money on global markets. And this is being built on an infrastructure that is still not fully developed. So you could imagine, as we put in place the necessary supercomputers, the secure and robust computing infrastructure, and then the blending with AI, this then gives us the opportunity to translate to providing solutions to sort of assisted diagnostics with telephones and methods that help local farmers, as were alluded to earlier. Just a significant opportunity space where already you are seeing some of the African capabilities translated into companies that have the potential to grow. And by the way, one of the fastest growing AI companies in the US is owned by an African of Nigerian descent, Kunle Olukotu. So Samba Nova is basically making lots and lots of money from recognizing gaps in the AI space in ways that could translate into opportunities for us here in Africa. Now, I want to give a different kind of example, because a lot of times, you know, some of the things that we need to do are simple. And so here in Impala in Kenya, I work in Impala Village at the Impala Research Center, studying the impact of technologies on rural communities, such as people who live in places like this. In this village, people used to have their light at night through kerosene lanterns. As a result of that, more than half of the kids had pulmonary problems, asthma. And so we decided to design a solar-powered lantern that is affordable even to the poorest person in the village. And so we took these kerosene lanterns that basically poison them, retrofitted with LED lights, a 6-volt battery, and a 2-watt panel. That gives you light for 10 hours every night. And they pay for these $2 a month over 12 months, which means that even the poorest person in the village could have light. And if they want, they can have these more attractive looking thing for $4 a month. Now, initially I worried that this may not be good enough, but this is the response we found in the village. And by creating financing schemes for people in that village, all 200 homes in that village have light today. So there's nothing to stop us from amplifying this across the continent, just simple innovation in a way that really created this. And by the way, you might ask, why not give it to people? You don't give things like this to people because you devalue those things. And the moment you give them to people, they don't want to pay. The moment they pay for this, then it means you can create an internal economy where this gets expanded to every village across the continent. Then they start preserving vaccines. They start making platforms that you can carry around. And so this is this Impala Clinic that is run by the Nomadic People's Trust that basically provides medicine to people across the Laikipia district, a place that's about twice the size of Israel. So the solutions can be variable in their levels of complexity. And at this point, I'd like to call on Kojo, please.
Thank you very much. And we also think that Africa should not be left behind when it comes to electric vehicle applications and the related technologies. So we at Sunyani Technical University, our vision is to raise the next generation of industry captains. And to achieve this vision, we have set up a center of excellence in electric vehicles and industrial welding technologies. And we are looking at how to train people, that is education, welders, fill in the professional gap that has already been mentioned. We always have to bring in people from abroad, into our oil industries and related fields. So at the center, we are going to train people to have these expertise and train experts for EVs. So charging stations. We're doing a lot of research that will help us, use even solar energy to charge, electric vehicles. And then hydrogen fuel cells, we will do more research into all these areas so that Africa will not be left behind. So the government of the Republic of Ghana has already, next slide, given the university some $1 million to set up this center. The construction of the infrastructure is almost completed. It's around 80 to 90%. So as we speak, we are going to train some 20 of the university staff in Canada through the BCDI 2030 facility that we have won, so that they come back and start the training at the center. And we will be able to come out with programs like electric vehicle fundamentals, certificate programs, diploma, bachelors, and all that, so that the center will actually serve the whole of Africa. So we believe that if we have more funding opportunities, we will be able to scale this up as an accelerator for the African region. Thank you.
Thank you. My own talk will be a little bit different because it's about what is the purpose of nanotechnology. Nanotechnology, we said, is the creation, utilization, and exploitation of nanomaterial. But the question is, has Africa really exploit the nanoscience? When the opening speech was being made, we hear about many PhDs. But the question is, it has been done in the lab. How do we turn it to be the one that Africa can own? We know that if there is any outbreak today, everybody run outside Africa. So now the purpose is, what we have done in the lab, we need a center, number one, when we talk about Earth, that we can create to speed up clinical trials, so that we can say this is African based. For example, in the issue of AIDS, look at cancer, for example, the conventional method, they have a lot of side effects. And now, in my group and many other groups in Africa, we are looking at phototherapy, which is photodynamic and photothermal, together with magnetic appetite, which actually have low invasive and can solve the problem. And we are talking about relating with other continents. Like, for example, in Japan, they develop a technology together with our group in finding a new pathway called lymphatic pathway for the administration of the cancer drug. Now, they've started the clinical trial in Japan. The question is, what will Africa do? Even though we are partnership, if care is not taken, before we know it, when they finish the clinical trial, put it into market, we start spending a lot of money. So the question is, when will Africa start their own center to speed up the clinical trial? We know what happened during the coronavirus. Because we don't have a certified center that is world class, that we can say, this is what Africa has done, what happened? We start depending on the outside world. And then we saw what they did to us. We shouldn't complain, because we are not developing our own scientists. We don't have a center where we can say, this is an outbreak, let's go there, let's speed up our clinical trial for things that we pertain to Africa. We are talking of people working in diaspora. Professor Sobeyojo will show some example. In collaboration with National Hospital in Abuja, I've been able to use machine learning to do diagnosis and treatment of one of the very top breast cancer, which is triple negative. But the question is, how do we now capitalize on it? And one of the message of Addis is that we need to build a center where all these things that have been done in silos can be put together, and we can be able to say, this belongs to the Africa. The same thing, we know we have a lot of medicinal plants. Mike's group and many other groups in Africa have done that, and you can see over 50,000 publications. But the question is, where is the center to turn this into what a common man is useful for the common man as we are training people? We talk about artificial intelligence, AI, that we now, I don't want to dwell on that, we are actually, people are in the 5th industrial revolution, but the question is, what will Africa do? And that is why we need this. And an example will be given whereby we have used AI learning to do diagnostic for treatment. We know some of these, everybody, especially in Africa, our gene is quite different. We need AI to know which particular drug will be useful to destroy something, any different type of cancer. And when we have a center whereby the upcoming generation can be trained. We know that they have said that we have a lot of percentage of people from 20 downward. If you see the way African children use smartphone, then we will know that we have no choice than to start investing on this rather than waiting on things that have been using in century. One of them is a professor in University of Johannesburg working on about sensors for HIV, cancer. This we need to develop so that the same way people do pregnancy tests, they just go to the supermarket, buy this. If you have a center where this can be developed, then it becomes very easy for anyone to go to the market. We know this is already certified. But when we don't have this, we will always be depending on things being brought back to the continent. I think I've solved it.
Thank you. So just to give you some example of cancer diagnostics and treatment, here's some work that's been done in collaboration with African labs in my group. And so this is work where we look at multiple data sets at different resolutions of cancer images. And as you dig deep to multiple resolution in this bag of multi-resolution data set, what you can actually do is to increase the accuracy of your detection to more than 99.9%. And so what this basically means is for our own types of cancer, if you look at the different measures of performance of these multi-resolution convolutional features, all these measures or metrics of performance are significantly enhanced with these kinds of approaches. And so this is work done by David Clement, who was a PhD student at AUST, and it's now work that's being used to build a larger database in ways that can really lead to translation. And I think it just gives us an example of what is possible when you leverage AI in health. The other work, which is also interesting, is work relevant to triple-negative breast cancer. And in this case, you can inject human triple-negative breast cancer cells into mice to induce triple-negative breast xenografts. And those bud out the receptors that are found in people. So you can then target nanoparticles to image breast tumors in ways that enrich the detection. When you have those injected nanoparticles, they enrich the contrast associated with the tumors, meaning you can detect sub-millimeter tumors. And you can take the same idea and target drugs. So I can take cancer drugs and I can target LHRH receptors, the receptors we find in African women. And when you target drugs such as paclitaxel or prodigozine, which is a drug that we've developed in our lab, what you do is you can then begin to shrink and eliminate those tumors. So if you look at the case where you have the targeted drugs, typically with delivery every 2 days or so of the drug that is targeted, you actually shrink and eliminate the tumor in about 8 days. So with studies like this, done in conjunction with the National Hospital, what we're now trying to do is the human trials. And you can imagine once we do the human trials with these drugs, there are many other targeted drugs that we can do in a way that targets receptors that are specific to people of African descent. And then beyond that, you can deliver drugs locally. So you can take gels, you can think of them as sponges that soak up liquid, and then you can trigger them thermally with body temperature. And when you do that, you then promote the localized release of that drug into the image. You are live streaming. Okay. So you promote the localized delivery of the drug into that region. And so in that way, you can deliver targeted drugs. And when you deliver those targeted drugs into regions with resected tumors, you stop the tumor from reoccurring. And what's even better is you can then use those structures, those scaffolds, to regrow the tissue. And so this again is work that we've been doing in collaboration with African graduate students. And what's interesting about this is that we're now at a point where we have an extended release over 90 to 120 days, and then the regrowth of the tissue in ways that need to be scaled up. And so this just, I hope, gives you a flavor of some of the work in the health area. I'd like to transition now to Gebisa to talk about agriculture and food technologies. Is it on? Okay.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Let me premise my comment by adding a couple of sentences to the introduction that Wally mentioned about our association. Wally is an engineer. Engineers create things. Engineers create things to solve problems. So this demand-driven idea is very well set in the mind of an engineer. And that is that you use your STEM education to create tools that would solve problems. I am a scientist. In science, our target is to generate knowledge and generate public good. But in some instances, some disciplines, we also have our mission and purpose drive in using our science to solve problems. In my career, I have committed myself to use the science I produce to find ways to solve problems in developing countries. And that is the common denominator between Wally and I, in that building the human capacity, strengthening institutions in Africa that we can do in things that he has expertise in, and also in the area that I'm working with. And so we're moving from electric vehicles, nanotechnology, AI, to fundamental foundational needs of humanity. And that is food security continues to be the foremost challenge of people around the world, and particularly our people in Africa here. And part of the reason is I wanted to share with you here that food and agriculture technologies from other places have been very slow in reaching Africa. And I'll use a couple of examples to make my point here, that in the 20th century, there were 3 significant transformative technologies in agriculture. One was in the 1930s, after the discovery of genetics early in the century, in 1908, the discovery of hybrid vigor was discovered. In 1930, the first hybrid corn technology was produced. And that hybrid corn technology, in my mind, is the most transformative agricultural technology ever created in the world at that time, and still is a very powerful tool, because what it did is not only produce hybrid crops that produce more, that tolerate stress, and they're efficient and sensitive to use of inputs, but it also catalyzed this demand drive. And that is that after the hybrid corn technology was created, somebody came up with an idea, how do we deliver this seed to farmers? The idea then was to establish seed production units that specialize in producing hybrid technologies. That you may think that is very simple, but I cannot tell you today that there isn't anywhere in the world where public institutions deliver seed to transform agriculture in any country in the world until hybrid seed technologies are delivered by seed companies. But the catch is you cannot make seed businesses profitable until you develop hybrid technology, because you put a demand that seed is delivered on a regular basis and available to farmers. Quality seeds at the right time delivered to farmers. And so to the 1930 technology that has been produced, then that technology was produced to Africa. Particularly, the first place where that technology was introduced was in Kenya, where USDA collaborated with the Kenyan government to establish a corn research program here in Kenya. That collaboration produced the first hybrid corn in Africa, and that was the Kenya, and then they created the conduit by creating the Kenya Seed Company. Unfortunately, it was a parastatal, and it was not a private sector. And so Kenya Seed Company that exists for as long, even though it has contributed to Kenya earlier on in order to neighboring countries, it really never took off. And even today, we don't have the kind of seed industry that would service African continent with technologies that are produced here. It's a very simple technology, you may think, but really the discipline that it requires to deliver quality seed, it's a very specialized technology that only the big industries have monopolized at the moment. And so we need that delivered here. And so the reason why I'm using these examples is that technologies have bypassed Africa, and one of those is hybrid seed company. And then again in the 20th century, in the 1970s, chemical seed companies started investing in seed companies because seed technology. The reason is they saw an opportunity what the DNA technology, recombinant inbred technology could do. And then in the 1990s, the first products were delivered, and so GMO technology was created. And those GMO technologies have not reached Africa for various reasons, including the demand not being generated, and also the market force that worked against them, and also the products that are good for Africa has never been created. So the point is, these were based on genetic biodiversity from developing countries taken to the developed world, and then investment are made and technologies are produced, but they never made it to poor developing countries because the seed companies found it is not profitable to target products for smallholder farmer communities. And the last one is the previous slide, please.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. And now we're talking about CRISPR technology, gene editing. And so that is still, we're afraid that might bypass us as well. And we need to make sure that we use the technologies we produce those technologies at home. The reason why these technologies have not been delivered then is really because our public institutions have not been strong, and the private sector has not been there. The trajectory in the 21st century looks good, and some of the evidences that you saw here, public institutions are proliferating across the continent, even though the quality needs some improvement. Higher education expansion in the last 2 decades, improvements also in R&D investment, and the youth immersion in technology and entrepreneurial capacity is very encouraging. So I believe that this initiative plans to leverage and capitalize and accelerate on these developments for impact. Next slide. I'll quickly go through it. And global food security is continuing to get harder and harder to solve in developing countries for various reasons, but generally, since the 20th century, food security agenda has been reactionary, and there is problems mainly as a result of drought and famine in Africa in the 20th century. That led to establishing higher education. That was a very smart thing to do, and then technology transfer were advised, but as I indicated, that those technologies did not reach Africa. In the 21st century, the 2007 and 2008, the global food and financial crisis, that really brought in the additional forces at work. That's when we realized climate change, land use changes, and planetary effects at that time. And then we also nuanced the contribution of food and food in nutrition, and the nutrition is nuanced because infant, children, child in nutrition, and vulnerable communities of women and elderly. And then we realized also that a lot of food loss and food waste, and then a diminishing land and water, making planetary issues more and more evident to us. And the last one is in 2020, 2022, global supply chain crisis. The conflict, the pandemic, and inflation brought in another shock, and the fragility and expanse and complexity of our global food system was recognized. That is to say that even though we're still struggling to feed humanity, the problem is getting complex, and so opportunity now to establish, strengthen our institutions in developing countries so that a better understanding of the food security agenda, and then find targeted solutions for target problems. And at the same time, the problem has been that globalization which has helped in many developing countries, now a lot of our communities are becoming inward looking, and so we need to really make sure that our institutions are strengthened and we produce the quality individuals and quality institutions that are capable to solve problems in developing countries. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Gebisa. And quite honestly, the opportunity for agribusiness that emerges from this science is just enormous. And so as we leverage biotechnology with the Internet of Things, it creates a global market. As we think about how we process different sort of plant waste into valuable products, it creates a lot of opportunity. And then with the richest biodiversity in the world, many of our plants offer real solutions. This year, for example, the Artemisia annua apparently can be used to make teas that really reduce the likelihood of malaria. All sorts of plants and even mushrooms can be made into textiles and shoes in ways that enable a whole industry around the biodiversity. Next, please.
I think so far we've indicated that interesting things are happening in Africa. One, it aligns with the high fives, covering all the areas, electricity, health, transport, etc. It also aligns with the STI strategy for Africa. But there is a challenge. Business as usual will not be able to achieve where we want to get to. There are gaps that we need to address. And I think this is
Thank you very much. One more round of applause to the team. Asante sana. You may now take your seats on this side so that we can have a quick interactive session. We have gone past our time. Sure. Now we'll do a group photo later. Yeah, it's okay. You're gonna. Yeah. So, before we leave, because you know when professors talk, you keep quiet. That's why you may realize that we could not stop the discussions, because the discussions are also very exciting. Now, I do not want to say a lot of stuff because we have a lot of professors here who are in the same fields that the team has shared. I think we have former VCs, vice chancellors from various universities from the country. We have leaders of organizations that are driving STI in the region. And so the conversation is going to take us to a better level. What we are looking for are not very much about questions, because if you have question and answers, that will take us more time. We want to move with comments, suggestions on how to design this arrest so that now we can move it to the level of operationalizing it. And I am going to open the floor. You know, there are microphones in front of you. Is it microphone? Yeah, you know, you can use the systems in front of you to raise question, to make a comment. Yeah, those ones here. I think they're working. Yes, they are working. So I'll take the first four questions. I have seen the first four questions. 5 actually. 6, that's okay. 7. No, you are going to ask questions. You know, because we have only 15 minutes. You know, I'm going to give you another 15 minutes so that we can take all the questions. We are now going to take time to listen to the team on this side. I'll start with Professor Mbithi. Then I'll go to Professor Victor. No, I'm seeing you. Don't worry. So, Prof, please, short and clear.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate and congratulate this team. Great idea, well thought, powerfully presented. But I would like to suggest a structure that is concise, that is progressive, fit for purpose, and that would deliver the objectives that have been clearly stated. Secondly, an African idea also, of course, catalyzed by other ideas, owned and spread across the whole continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. That was very quick and specific. Professor Murinde.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to add also my congratulations to the group. Brilliant idea. My one comment is that the applications and the use cases were in agriculture, healthcare, energy, public sector, and we actually forgot the big elephant in the room. This is applications to finance, which actually started here in Kenya with M-Pesa and revolutionized the whole world. I think we need AI and machine learning to applications to finance. I'm involved in a project that is looking at 2 countries, India and the UK, and where they trade. I think a lot can be done on Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, that's a very quick sort of comment on improving the network. Let me apologize. I think I should let people introduce themselves. As you talk, please say who you are, which institution you work for, so that I do not need to mention names. So Professor Mbithi is from the University of?
Yes, from the University of Nairobi.
Good. Professor Murinde is the Executive Secretary of?
Executive Director of the African Economic Research Consortium.
Thank you. My brother, over to you.
Okay, my name is Losenge Turop. I'm the Director of Pan-African University. And I just want to, maybe, we are not allowed to ask questions, we are supposed to comment. And my comment is that you have highlighted existing efforts. And I am asking myself, what is the need of ARIST if we could revamp the existing efforts to cater for the idea that you've given? Out of it, I think the main different thing from the existing efforts that I've seen is the accelerators. What happens when we infuse these to existing efforts so that we can be able to attain impact in the shortest time possible? Starting a new institution, ARIST, to me, I can see a very lengthy time to fill anything in the continent of Africa. So I would want to suggest that we think of revamping existing efforts so that the idea of ARIST is carried up by already existing institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Tirop, my brother.
Thank you very much. My name is Philip Pande, the Executive Director, Corporate Career Academy. I'm also affiliated to the STEM Impact Center based here in Nairobi, but working across several African countries. Now, of course, a very brilliant idea supported by great minds. Two things that I would say. Number one is in the aspect of implementation. Please, those of us who are non-professors but are in the space of innovation and commercialization of science, technology, and innovation would be very happy to be part of that process, and that is the youth. The second thing is that there are several ideas on science, technology, and innovation in many universities across Africa. But one component that has been missing is taking them to the market and scale. So my particular emphasis would be on objective 3, which is in acceleration, but acceleration with the aspect of innovation and investments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I now move to this side before I get back to this side. Dr. Ross.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here this morning. I think we are deliberating on the future trajectories of our economies. I've just three things. One, we recognize that as we talk about advancing advanced manufacturing technology, currently we have quite a huge size of informal manufacturing, and a key issue that may be necessary is to see how this kind of effort is also going to support the existing manufacturing units, which are actually informal. They have their own challenges in terms of even innovation and also in standardizing their products. The second one is related to what was said earlier, that we want to use AI for evidence-informed policy-making process. And you know that a lot of this evidencing is done at think tanks level. Is a question also of considering them. I've seen on the platform, it's only those who have done the heavy science. I've done economics. I don't know where economics is in this context. Yet we are a think tank that would use actually an AI in terms of technology. And then the third thing is about you are targeting the under. Well, it's not necessarily you have a focus on the under 20s. That generation. There's the aspect of it brings in the aspect of funding. Yes, you may be thinking about the private sector, but also for sustainability. How do we ensure that the government effort is also put in? I like the fact that we can have even development partners, but sustainability actually also lies in the buy-in and the support from government. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Kamau Gashege. I run an organization called Gearbox, which is a non-profit and looks at innovation, creating innovation from the point of view of engineering in particular. And we also have a for-profit which does electronic circuitry. My point is, I'm hoping that within the structure of ARIS, which I think is a fantastic idea, there may be facilitation for two types of funds. One is an innovation fund, so that upstream you have quality types of outputs from the research that can become commercialized. And then secondly, what has already been raised is a fund for commercialization. And third, the fact that it's Africa Development Bank that's involved in this, I wonder, do we have a way to make sure that offtake is possible from the research ecosystem? Meaning, for example, government procurement can be brought to bear to provide opportunities for the kinds of research that we're talking about, the outputs. In other words, governments can spend their own money to buy, and that will help then to guarantee that the funds that are funding the companies coming out of this are able to make their money, besides just reliance on the private sector.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kamau. I'm now going to get this side. Professor Ogutu.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited, even just the name Renaissance. And all I want to say is let's not see each other as competitors. So at Strathmore, we're very aware that the problems we're dealing with are much bigger than ourselves. So if you're talking Renaissance, then we need all hands on deck. So my challenge to you is how can you create a platform where we share the challenges? So what are the major challenges? Almost like the research questions. And then we map who's doing what do you think you can contribute to this joint effort? And then, of course, working with Africa Development Bank, there's so much financing that we're looking at here. We want to make our campus like a living campus, build a STEM complex that's a living lab, and happy to hear about financing options for that as well. So thank you so much for this effort, and keep it up.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, my name is Titus Ngatia. I'm the director of Effortless Insight Africa, which is an innovation company based here in Nairobi. I'll begin by submitting that the word education comes from a Latin word educo, which means to educe, to develop, to draw out, or to rear from within. So technically, we must be clear about what we mean by job creation, because in the past it used to be, the permanent and pensionable, but now things are very dynamic. So even when you talk about demand-driven kind of capacitation, we must also be conscious of the fact that even though industry is leading, sometimes these sectors fizzle out. So what happens when they fizzle out? Where do these people go who are working in that industry? So we should focus more on the agile capabilities and capacity building in terms of the pipeline of the education system. And finally, with regard to AI, it's very humbling for us to realize that only 43% of Africa has mobile phones of this youthful population we're talking about. And we have only one supercomputer in Morocco, you guys remember that. And that AI, particularly ChatGPT, used only Egypt with 11,000 data points for the whole of Africa. So we are still a long ways off, and we have to be a bit more grounded about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ngatia. Madam?
Good morning. My name is Ivy Wamboy Mushoki. I'm here in the capacity of Global Youth Parliament, but I would like to speak on my other capacity as the advisory panel to the Global Center on Adaptation. So one of the few things that Africa needs to understand is that we need to adapt to the kind of current issues that are happening on the globe, and Africa needs adaptive solutions. One of the few things that Professor Van Kuyen has been trying to achieve is the aspect of creating a Silicon Valley for the African continent. So if you can be using the universities to be able to drive this agenda, because the young people have the capacity and the resource and the intelligence to be able to drive this agenda. So one of the few things I'd really like to advocate is that universities be at the top, at the helm of this kind of innovation with regards to STEM and development and AI and robotics. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, my brother.
Thank you so much. My name is Julius Echuru. I'm from Isipe in Nairobi, and we manage the PASET, which Professor Wole talked about, specifically the Regional Scholarship and Innovation Fund. So I think I like the concept of ARIS. It's a great idea, and I think I like what Professor Wole and the others mentioned, how the university should influence the ecosystem. And there's a heavy focus also on accelerators and so on. But I think one of the missing pieces, which I think the initiative or all of us should consider, is bringing in the trade and industry and linking all these efforts to the industrialization policy of Africa, or even in our countries, so that we don't have these mismatches between what education is proposing and what the industrial policy is proposing and what the business environment looks like. Because if we don't do that, then we can't actually commercialize all these precious ideas.
Thank you very much. No, we have time. I'll take all the questions before we go for breakfast. Madam.
Thank you. I hoped it will come to me sooner. I was holding the mic. Yeah, my name is Sarah Kajuju. I'm a growth coach in the area of entrepreneurship and innovation, as well as developing individuals. And I find always a missing link where scientists sit to talk. People in science, technology, engineering, and math sit to talk because there's one very missing piece in terms of developing very soft skills that would help us to lead, to communicate, and to be able to do all that we do, and even living together as individuals. So this is something that ought to be considered, and I'd love to be part of that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my brother.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. My name is Patrick Okori. I work for Forum. I'm the executive secretary. We are a network of predominant agricultural universities. We're 177 across 40 countries of Africa. We're in all the regions. We focus on graduate training. And my basic comment is about sustainability, and there are two issues. The first is that I think we've had lots of setups like this happen across the continent, but it is also important, as somebody mentioned earlier, to link up with the other similar initiatives or like-minded initiatives so that we can build on the principles of cost leverage and lesson learning across the years. I think the second one is that after listening to presentations, it was obvious to me that we are trying to use science to provide development solutions. And development is complex. It's never siloed, it's never in small pieces, and it's pretty continuous. So I think that in the design of the programs, it's important that certain key principles are put in place. One is the whole thing about integration. Two is the whole thing about diversity and inclusion. You have almost 60% of our female population out of science, and yet they feed this continent. And so we can't get solutions when we have a huge portion of our youth and women excluded completely. We'll not be solving any problem, however smart they are. And then the third one is downscaling. Africa is a very complex place, a very large place. No one solution is going to fix all the problems. So if we want to downscale, you need to work. We need to design these things to work with different actors, networks, academic, health, environment, agriculture, as one of my sisters here said, economics. They must work in an ecosystem atmosphere rather than centers of excellence in their own. We've had them before, and they haven't quite cut the mustard. So to improve the center of X idea, we need to embed them in an ecosystem of different development actors. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. Professor Kioni.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Kioni, former Vice Chancellor of Dedan Kimathi University of Technology, and currently leading an initiative of establishing Origin Research and Innovation Labs, which is a concept of United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Dedan Kimathi University of Technology has the first national science park, and in that park we have a semiconductor industry with a kind of fab labs that Professor Antilabi was presenting. My proposal is that this is a very good thing. We cannot have enough of this kind of initiatives. But even as we go about that, we need to look at ecosystem development. We are not lacking the scientists. We are not lacking talented young people. What we are lacking is a pipeline to get them from the universities into the industry. The kind of transformation that we require and we want the universities to bring is the one that cannot actually be achieved without having an industry partner. And a very good example and lessons is what we've learned from hosting and developing the semiconductor fab labs. Secondly, I would like to propose that this kind of initiative should take into account other similar initiatives. There is a massive project going on in Kenya in the establishment of Kenya Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, and it provides also for quite a lot of the things that you are talking about, and is also looking at partnerships in terms of the human resource, in terms of research programs and so on, and you have the space to do some of these things. So there are no, I repeat again, it's a good initiative. We cannot have enough of them. We want more of them. And as a former Vice Chancellor, we benefited immensely, for example, from the existence of PAUSTI, because we were able to train people there and also from other institutions on the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Okay, thank you so much. My name is Zablon Ogola. I'm founder of Blogging Kenya. So my biggest concern will be for, as we know that Africa is very rich in terms of indigenous knowledge. And most of the problems that we've faced before have been solved by the virtue of adopting the indigenous knowledge. So as we come up with the innovation, with the AI, how can we strike a balance between the two so that we also enhance the indigenous knowledge? Thank you.
Thank you. That was a quick one. I'm now taking the last questions, comments, sorry. You can use the microphone on the table.
Thank you so much for the insightful panel that we had on the ARIST. I'm Hudson Thomas, Executive Director of GreenSpace, an organization that works with young people on matters policy and innovation with reference to climate change in Kenya. Now, looking at a subject on green growth initiative, owing to the fact that 35% of GDP emanates from agriculture in Africa, more so in the agricultural sector, and 50% of the livelihoods from agriculture is achieved from that sector. How are we looking at advancing green growth initiatives, more so with the context of ARIST from the African perspective? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Green space. It's an exciting space to work in. Gideon?
Thank you. My name is Gideon Murenga. I work with GIZ in Kenya as the Senior TVET Advisor. I want to speak about the demand-oriented education component. GIZ is already supporting dual TVET in Kenya, and there are 7 centers of excellence that are going to be established. They'll be one of the biggest in Africa in terms of infrastructure, in terms of partnerships. Some of those institutions have already been linked to German institutions and TVET and Finnish institutions, and they're already working on aspects of innovation. So what I want to say is that as we are looking at establishing these institutions, there are already models that you can be able to learn from already. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gideon and GIZ. We look forward to working with you. Professor Amasi.
Thank you, Prof. I'm Professor Hamasi, Acting Principal for the Kenya Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, which has been mentioned. The moderator is the chair of the council of the university. It's about to be launched. I'm very excited to hear what you are proposing to start. I see a brother or a sister, whatever it will be, that we could collaborate with. We have 14 flagship academic programs that have been identified that can steer Kenya into the next level of industrialization and modernization. Right now, we are working very hard to get connections with industry that you work with, and also looking for top-notch students, top-notch professors who are willing to join Kenya as we launch it this year. It's about to be launched this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I give it to Albert. Good. You know, I told you that I'll take all the comments. Please, we are taking all the comments to improve on the design of this institute. So all those comments that we have shared with us will be used by the team to refine the concept, and that will be shared with all of us. And you're all live, so everything that you said is also being listened to by those guys those of us who are following up the conversation online. So Albert is the Executive Secretary of ADARE, the ADARE you talked about in your presentation.
Thank you. I thought you had forgotten me. So thank you for giving me the floor, and thank you to Indrina. So I'm Alban Sengiyomba. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Association for the Development of Education in Africa, hosted by the African Development Bank. And our focus is really to promote policy dialogue forum on education and training. A couple of ideas moving forward, because everything has been said. Everything has been said. What we now need to see, where do we go from here? I think that's really a critical issue that I see that need to be discussed. Number one, let me first appreciate that the brain drain is paying back. When I see the professors sitting there, trying from any big university in the world, coming back to the continent and trying to see the role that they can play to meet the goals of this continent. So thank you for coming back. The second, when I heard the interventions, it's almost like we're trying to convince a converted audience. This audience is already converted. The issue is, how do we take this message outside? How do we go and talk to leaders? Because there is a reason why these things did not happen 30, 20 years ago. And one of the reasons, at least, is our leadership, our decision makers, to understand, unless the change comes from within the continent, not outside. You can learn from outside, but in the end, the change will come from within. And this is what I want to suggest. I was talking to Andrina. I see an opportunity to organize a high-level convening with decision makers from policy and private. Because the next step is to see the seats that you are using as professors. On one side, policymakers, on the other side, the private sector. Because you are here to support them. The second, I remember President Nana said this during one of these replenishment of the Global Partnership for Education in Dakar. We Africans, we set priorities, and we request others to pay for our priorities. The means will have to come from within. What the African Development Bank is doing, what the World Bank is doing, is that's the initial step. In the end, demand-driven means the private sector should also pay the bill. That's demand-driven. You cannot set the priorities and look for somebody else to pay for it. That's not our priorities anymore. So I think that's a very important point I want to make. There is a point that was made around other initiatives, similar initiatives that have been happening on the continent. I want to suggest that probably this is something that colleagues have already initiated. We need to map out all these initiatives that the African Development Bank, the World Bank, and other things have done aligned to this idea. We need that mapping. Because in the end, we are not starting from scratch. We are coming to strengthen something that has already started, that maybe need a bit of coordination, need a bit of urgency, need a bit of understanding from leaders to all the players. So having that map to start with, and organize a high-level convening where what we were talking about here would actually be presented to those who make decisions. To me, that's a very important step we need to look at. Last but not least, a meeting of this kind, one, physical is good, but we cannot be making this meeting because of the cost associated. I think there was an idea of establishing a forum. Let's have a forum that can continue this discussion. We now have technology. Let's see how we can continue these discussions, bring other members of the diaspora, the private sector, so that we build a momentum, we expand the momentum to as many Africans and also friends of Africa as possible. I think let's continue this debate as we move to a much bigger convening where we can actually mobilize decision makers accordingly. So let me stop here. I just want to appreciate the work, the initiative taken by the African Development and colleagues here. We are here to support you. We will definitely mobilize policymakers to bring them on board, because this is our responsibility anyway. It's not somebody else's responsibility. If we don't reach this, I think you have said all. The amount of import goods that Africa is now getting is more billions. One of the targeted goals is to reverse. We need to become producers as we raise, as not as consumers. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Albert? A round of applause to all of us. I think Albert has just put it so well, that here all of us are converted. And the things that were shared with us here are the things that most of us are doing here in our institutions in the continent. So bringing those forces together to increase impact will be critical through the collaboration and the partnership that we've talked about. And we all agree that the focus on STI, the bringing together all these sort of efforts and actioning on a plan of implementation, so that we meet the dream of the African Union Agenda 2063 and also our national visions that we have across the continent will be critical. And we know, as you put it in your presentation, the next biggest chunk of job opportunities will be created within the space of STI, through the AI that you talked about, and so on and so forth. And we cannot afford to be left behind as a continent, because if we are left behind, then the opportunities that exist within the space will not sort of benefit our people on this continent. I know we are now late by 10 minutes. I would be inviting you out for breakfast after this session. But before I call upon Andrina to make the final remarks on this, let me say two things. One, you have shared a lot, and the thought process is the same. So, Professor, we are in agreement that what you've shared is something that will benefit our countries in Africa. And all these institutions, all these experts are ready to work with us as a team to make sure that we actualize that dream of ARIST. Number two, we do agree that we cannot keep on convening physical meetings when we are talking about STI. We must now make use of STI to live the dream and show that the things that we're talking about are possible. Of course, we want you to come to Nairobi because of the national park around and a few other things that you can see around. But let us convene many of the meetings online so that we can also bring most of the audience that are aligned with the thoughts that we have on the table. And finally, in Kenya, and I think that has been mentioned by the Kenyans here, the experts, and especially Professor Kioni, we have the Konza Technopolis. The Konza Technopolis is a space that the government of Kenya set to grow the ideas that we've shared here. Konza Technopolis is 50 kilometers from Nairobi. It is the Silicon Valley, or the Silicon Savannah, or the Silicon Valley of Africa. So in the coming meetings, we are going to invite you there to hold your meetings there, and you will see a few animals who are also very conversant with the gadgets that you're using, technology that we're talking about. And we have a conference coming up in September on smart cities, again, technology and so on and so forth. This is an opportunity for you to also come and share the same so that we can build the momentum. And that is where we have the Kenya Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, which is the newest university, specialized university in this country, and which we are taking it as the African premier University of Science, Technology, Innovation, and Research. So the same sort of concept that we have are the same concept that we have in the university, and the same concept that the government of Kenya is driving to make sure that we grow a population that is, that has the capacity to drive the national agenda of this country. So welcome you to partner with us down there. We also welcome you to visit us in Konza Technopolis so that we can walk this journey together to move Africa to the next level. Now, Madam Andrina, it is your turn to make the closing remarks. After Andrina, we are going now to have a photo session here and then a breakfast out there. Andrina, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Manuel, and for facilitating this session. And I just want to appreciate everyone. I think for us, it was really testing the waters and to see which direction as a bank would go to actually support this idea. And I'm very excited that they start acknowledgement that this is indeed an idea that we all need to support. This is indeed something that we all need to look at and walk the talk together. Now, in terms of, if you noted, we're more of on the listening beat and just to gauge and to appreciate the inputs from all of you. But in terms of the next steps from what we have heard as the bank, I think there are a couple of things that we need to do to move this to the next level. One of the things that has come out quite clear in this conversation is the fact that there's a lot that is going on out there. And if we are to come in as a bank and add value to what already exists, I think what we are going to do is to look at, let's do the platform that the knowledge piece, to just understand what is going on in the different countries and so on, because that would be critical. We would like to build on what already exists. And we hope that we'll be able to use that kind of information to then think through and say, if this is what is on the ground, where do we move from here? And I do believe that that kind of conversation has to happen even before we go to policymakers and share this as an idea that the Africa Development Bank would like to undertake. So one is really some knowledge piece around that, get a better understanding, create that platform where people can make contributions and say what they are doing, but also use that information to actually summarize and say, this is the status and these are the possibilities of where we want to go. The second bit also, as we do that, we'll also be looking at champion countries. Because as you know, the Africa Development Bank works very closely or works with regional member countries. I think what would be helpful for us is to identify, maybe from the knowledge that we are going to collect, but also from some of the examples that we have heard, we may have to engage some of those countries and just find out the possibilities of them being part of this journey and for them being champions in hosting ARIT. And then once we establish what is on the ground, what the issues and what the gaps are, and I feel that this I have to consult with my team, but I feel that that activity is something that we can incorporate into the support that we are providing phase 2 of the Pan-African University. So we may have to have some further conversation with them and see how do we bring in this knowledge piece within the broader framework that we are supporting, and hopefully that can be done as soon as possible. Once we get that, we get the champions, we then propose to have policy dialogue. That policy dialogue will be for two things. One, of course, and I know this came from the team as well, from the conversation, we need to get the buy-in, government's buy-in. If we get the champions, those champions will help us to convince other governments so that when we take this up, we take it as Africa and we don't take it as individuals, individual countries. We do acknowledge that the African Union through the Pan-African University is pursuing something similar in this regard. We may explore that, but that again will depend on the level of information that we get and also the buy-in. And this buy-in consultation will also engage the regional blocks, but will also engage the Africa Union because of the Pan-African University. Yeah. So after the policy dialogue, we then sit down and look at, okay, this is what we have. These are the opportunities that exist. Maybe within that process, we also need to establish a think tank that would kind of hold on to this process and make sure that it happens, so that we work together up to the level where we'll then be designing a program that will say, okay, this is how it's going to go, and this is what the bank is likely to fund. There may be ideas to say we pick one or two ideas and run with, but again, I'll leave that to us when we go to the next consultation to look at, what is doable and what is not doable. So to summarize, for me and for the Africa Development Bank, we have 4 things. Understand what is on the ground and establish opportunities for moving forward. The second one is develop identify champions that would support the process. And the champions here, we have 2 types, the country champions, but we're also thinking of a think tank that will help move the process. The fourth one is organize a high-level policy dialogue where we are going to share some of this information, but also celebrate some of the works that are happening on the continent, and ask policymakers to say we need to move this together, and we will make suggestions on some of the actions that we would undertake to move the process together. And then the last one, based on those 3 steps, we hope then that we'll be able to come up with a specific program that will then be aligned to, it may not just be the bank, because we'll also talk to other partners that we think could support, that we could work together and come up with something bigger, something that is going to serve the needs that some of us have already identified for the continent, and move that process as a team. I think those are the 4 key things I would want to say now, but this consultation will continue. We may do a follow-up just to have a webinar and look at specific actions, or to provide update on some of the actions that we have undertaken, so that everybody is kept abreast on what is going on. And my other request also is that, because you are part of this initial process, when we call you for conversations, please spare that time, because we need to move this needle together. If you are left behind, and then it will be very difficult for you to catch up, because I think we are going to go at the speed of lightning, and we want to make sure that everybody moves with us and everybody moves as a team. And then lastly, I think my last is to appreciate the team that is behind this, and I've also gotten institutions that have offered to provide the support. And I think for us as a team is also looking at what are those possibilities that have been put on our table, and how do we move that. And I do know, like I said earlier, there are many other possibilities out there that we may identify even as we do that feasibility study, as we are calling it, to just establish that. So I want to say thank you so much for all of you. Thank you to the RH team, who have been very, very proactive. And I think the ideas, you have seen it from here, these are ideas that we are certainly going to move forward. And as a bank, we are really committing to this. If you can give us a bankable project, we'll be happy to support it. Thank you.
Yes, one more round of applause. I think we've done a very good job. Just a bit of time lapse, because it took 15 minutes more. Edrina is the manager of education and skills development at the African Development Bank. So she's in charge of whatever you're talking about here at the African Development Bank. So when she talks about bankable, she's the one who is going to give you that money if you bring those bankable projects on the table. Number 2, because of what she said about continuing the conversation with this team, there is a sort of a registration sheet that has been going around. If you have not registered, please do put your name there, so that you can put including as part of the communication, around the activities that will take place, in the design, of the ARIST. And finally, because now we've come to the end of this event, we are going to, the speakers will have a photo in front here, as we also go for coffee or tea or breakfast, and also continue with the conversation and exchange cards with some of these people, our experts here, so that we can also sort of have bilateral engagements moving forward. So thank you very much. Again, my name is Emmanuel Mutisia.
Can I make a suggestion, Manuel? Sorry.
Yes.
The photo should not just be for the speakers. We have the speakers and we have everybody on the stage, so that we can we can have a family photo. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we can.
So you have the speakers,
yep,
and then all of us should come.
Okay, then the speakers first. The camera guys, please. And Andrina, please. No, we just. No, he's standing. Andrina, please. You can join this photo. So I can plan it to balance. I don't want this.
DJ Jirash from Mars.
No, it's okay, it's okay. I'm sitting in between them, and then I'll stand at the edge.
Warned you of the
Yes.
Let me give a shout out to my real fans and professional DJs.
Aberdares.